Good night, horror stories. My name is Charles, and I want to tell you a story about when I was a real estate advisor and I traveled a lot to different cities in the United States to study the market and visit some properties. I was in my youth and traveled frequently. Now I am a family man, and I dedicate myself to my own business. I have many anecdotes that I usually tell among friends and family, but on this occasion I would like to share this paranormal experience that terrified me a lot at the time. It is the one that was most difficult for me to believe happened to me, being a skeptical person regarding these types of events. On one of my road trips in 2013, I had to stay one night in a hotel along the way, one of those found in desolate places. I remember I had to take a trip from Denver to Nashville, and it was a few hours of travel. I decided to leave a day early to arrive on time and rest. I knew I had to stop one night to eat something and sleep in one of these hotels. The company paid for everything, so I took the opportunity to take it easy. He made frequent trips from time to time, and the truth is that he was not afraid of driving at night on the highway, until that night when everything changed. I was on Route 70, and sleep was already conquering me. I was listening to the radio and had had a coffee, but I had been driving for several hours and needed to rest. It began to cloud over and the wind appeared strong, announcing an imminent storm. It was around 1 in the morning when I parked at a roadside hotel. Continuing to drive like this would be dangerous, so I stopped at the first hotel I found. The place was desolate. There was only one car parked in the parking lot. The hotel lights barely illuminated. The night was extremely quiet and the darkness overwhelming. I walked into the reception, and there was an older man sitting on a couch, almost asleep, watching television. When he saw me, he treated me kindly. I asked him for a room for one night. He gave me the keys and I went to a room on the second floor, which I liked because I wouldn't hear as much noise from trucks or cars parking in the hotel parking lot at night. I've always been a very light sleeper, and any noise wakes me up. So I was grateful to have a room on the second floor. I went up the stairs and headed towards her. It was simple and old-fashioned, but comfortable enough to sleep in for a few hours. I took off my clothes and lay directly on the bed. I fell asleep instantly. Shortly after, a little over an hour, I woke up hearing conversations and a lot of noise in the next room. It seemed that several young people were having a meeting or a party, with simultaneous laughter and voices. Bottle noises could also be heard, as if they were drinking. Although I couldn't understand their conversations, it was clear that the sounds were coming from the next room. I got out of bed, somewhat annoyed by the noise, and moved closer to the wall to hear better. Sure enough, the voices and laughter continued. I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't fall asleep. I decided to give them a few more minutes, thinking that maybe they would calm down, but the noise didn't stop. I finally put on a t-shirt and went out into the hallway. I knocked on the door of the next room, asking them to lower the volume a little. I knew that if they were drinking, I could get into trouble, but I needed to rest. However, when I arrived, I knocked softly on the door and, getting no answer, knocked louder. Still no one responded. I approached the door and noticed that there was no light coming from under the door or any sign of activity inside. Puzzled, I returned to my room. The noise had completely stopped. I went back to bed, trying to convince myself that it had been some kind of strange dream. But just as he was about to fall asleep, the voices and laughter started again, clearly coming from the next room. I thought they were joking. Sometimes the noise stopped completely and then came back with a lot of noise. I couldn't sleep all night. I was banging on the wall from my room, but they were still at their party without caring. I was too tired to get up and drive. I really needed to rest, but the noise didn't stop until 6 in the morning, when it started to get light. At that moment, the bustle stopped. I opened the door and looked to see if the young people were already leaving, but I didn't see anyone except an employee cleaning the second floor. I greeted her and she responded politely by asking me if everything was okay. I answered yes, but told him that I hadn't been able to sleep well because of the noises coming from the next room all night. His expression became somewhat confused, and he told me that no one else had stayed at the hotel the night before. The owner, the man at the reception who had greeted me, had informed him that I was the only guest and that he had to clean the room when he left. I responded that that couldn't be, that perhaps those young people had sneaked in through a window or forced the door, because I was completely sure of the noise and voices I had heard at night. He assured me that the owner had security cameras everywhere and was constantly monitoring them. Furthermore, The rooms could only be opened with a card that they gave you at reception, and the windows were always closed with the lock from the inside. I insisted that they had surely slipped in somewhere. The employee frowned and looked at me carefully before answering. She seemed convinced I wasn't joking, and my face started to pale. Finally, he told me that since he was so confident with what I was telling him, he would check the next room just in case. I followed her to the next door. He took out a card and inserted it into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a completely empty and tidy room. There were no signs of bottles or signs of a party. I was shocked, expecting to find a mess, bottles thrown away, cigarette filters, the bed made a mess. However, the room was spotless, as if no one had used it. There were no open windows or anything to indicate that someone had forced entry. The lady looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "There's no way anyone could have been here without us realizing it," he said, closing the door behind him. "There has been no entry record other than yours." I stayed silent, trying to process what was happening with no response. I went down to the front desk, thanked the owner, and headed to my car. As I drove, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had experienced. It was as if the road and the hotel held dark secrets from a past that had not yet been fully discovered. He still remembered the noises and voices of those young people, and although there were no signs that they were there, he could not accept that it had been something from the beyond, something paranormal. I continued my destination, visited the properties I had to see, and returned to Denver, but this time without stopping at any hotels. I arrived home at night, and the first thing I did was investigate the hotel where I had stopped to sleep. What I found was creepy. I discovered that the hotel indeed had a dark history. In December of the 2000s, when the hotel had a different name and was known for its age, it was the scene of a tragic accident. A group of young people who had rented several rooms were on vacation and stopped one night at that hotel to rest, but their fate was inexplicably tragic. They died after a fire started inside the hotel. Many of the occupants of other rooms managed to escape with their lives, but those in the room next to mine could not escape. It is said that the window was stuck inside and that they tried to break it, but they did not succeed. The key to the door was never found. Surely, in that moment of chaos, she was not found and had been swept away by the fire. Since then, there have been multiple accounts of customers hearing voices, laughter, and unexplained noises in adjacent rooms. What shocked me the most was discovering that, despite the hard work of the firefighters and paramedics, they were unable to determine the cause of the fire that claimed the lives of those young people in the hotel. What I read about the accident and what I heard that night at the hotel began to connect in my mind. A chill ran through my body as I considered the possibility that the voices and noises I had heard belonged to the souls of those young people who lost their lives in that tragic fire. Although it was hard to believe, I couldn't deny the connection my mind was making between both events. That night, despite being tired, I couldn't fall asleep. I tried again and again, but every time I closed my eyes, the laughter and murmurs of that fateful night at the hotel echoed in my mind. The memory of the dark horror history of the place had become a heavy burden on my thoughts. I felt a presence in my room, as if the spirits of those young people were still present, seeking justice or simply echoing their tragedy. I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable, as if I had unearthed something that was not to be disturbed. If you have enjoyed this story, we invite you to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any others. Until next time.